Hey, it's Ryan Holman, founder of Sales Recruiting University. I'm so excited to get through this training with you. This is going to be a quick introduction and we'll rock and roll. Just so you know a little bit about my background and what I currently do, I have a team of over 30 people. We help commission-based sales organizations all over the country. I currently manage about 100 companies' sales recruiting departments and facilitate around 1,000 recruits going into about 100 companies every single month, and all commission and some primarily commission-based sales opportunities. And so what we're going to talk about today is something that we deliver from either a service or a coaching perspective for hundreds of companies all over the country. I've served 630 organizations in the last 4 years with this company, which is my third company in 8 years. And this is all I've been working on during that time frame, is high volume sales recruiting. So there's 7 things we're going to talk about today. Again, how to recruit 5 to 10 commission-based sales reps in the next 90 days while finding your sales manager at the same time. The first thing, we're going to talk about recruiting process. There's a lot of different ways you can run recruiting process. I'm going to talk about what we've dialed in, what I've personally dialed in over an 8-year period, and let you know why that is a really efficient process that is designed for high volume sales recruiting, which again is what we're going to talk about today. The second thing we're going to talk about is candidate lead generation. Okay, now that we have the structure and the process for recruiting, how do we pump enough candidates through that process, enough volume to actually have the end result of the recruiting needs that we desire? The third thing is the screening and scheduling process. How do I get in front of people in this high volume sales recruiting process without having to talk to 50 people on phone interviews every single week to hit my recruiting goals? That's going to be an awesome thing for you guys to understand. Followed by that, the fourth thing, we're going to talk about interview structure, right? So out of that high-level sales recruiting process that we'll talk about at the beginning, what does the actual interview structure look like? A structure that obviously closes down the best people, but that's also designed for volume while at the same time not wasting time in the recruiting process, right? We're going to talk about an extremely efficient recruiting process that's designed for volume. The fifth thing we're going to talk about is the onboarding process, right? After you get a rep to commit, what are the core things that you need to be doing to make sure they have a good onboarding and training experience? Followed by that, the sixth thing, we're going to talk about retention, okay? Right? It's not just about getting them to commit, and it's not just about having the first couple good weeks. What does it look like to actually retain the right people, the right culture fit long term? And that comes to company culture. So we're going to talk about some culture things that are going to be really important to you. And then finally, the seventh thing, we're going to talk about that bonus part of the training, which is how do I find sales management throughout this whole process? Now, that may not be relevant to everybody that's watching this training, but regardless of where you're at, it's going to be really awesome for you to intellectually understand. So how to recruit 5 to 10 commission-based sales reps in the next 90 days while finding your sales manager at the same time. Let's get into the training. Okay, so the first thing, it's all about the recruiting process, right? You can't go into something blindly and not know your general structure within your business or the organization that you work with, because then you can't execute on a plan because it doesn't exist. And so there's a lot of ways to do recruiting. I specialize, and our company specializes in high volume sales recruiting for companies that are hiring commission-based or primarily commission-based sales reps. And so what I mean by that is they have a consistent need to pump bodies into the organization. And so we base our whole system on volume. Now there's some companies that can take on way more volume than others, right? I'm going to go over the average results of what our clients do just so you can paint a picture of what we talked about, which is retaining 5 to 10 commission-based sales reps in the next 90 days while finding your sales manager at the same time. So the general process looks like advertisements, which we'll talk about later. Advertisements, a streamlined screening and scheduling process. We're pushing all the best candidates into group interviews, right? So obviously with this, we're scratching out the phone interview, right? One of the biggest time wasters, especially for a commission-based sales type of opportunity, is doing phone interviews, because the problem is to actually hit your recruiting goals, you need to pump volume through the system. And so when I look at 90 days, right, in recruiting and retaining 5 to 10 commission-based sales reps over a 90-day period, well, really what we're doing is we're actually recruiting at least 24 reps. And those are the numbers I'm going to talk about here in a second, is recruiting 2 reps a week or 8 a month or 24 over 90 days at a minimum to retain those 5 to 10. Now, sometimes companies, if they have like training pay, they can recruit less and retain those numbers. And some companies want to crush those numbers out of the water, and they can based on their advertisements, because operationally they can take on the volume of candidates signing up with their company. But anyways, the process is advertisements, a streamlined screening and scheduling process, which is what we'll talk about here in a few minutes. You're pushing all the best candidates into a group interview, no longer wasting time on the phone interview and trying to schedule your one-on-ones and then having people no-show and wasting a ton of time both in the phone interview process and in the no-shows for your finals. But what you're doing is you're pushing all the best people that typically would be worth connecting with on a phone interview into a group presentation. You're pitching the dream. We'll talk about that structure here in a few minutes later in the training. And then you're funneling the people that are highly interested and that fully understand the A to Z opportunity after that 20 to 30 minute group presentation. You're funneling those people into one-on-one interviews right after the group interview, whether that's in an online or in a face-to-face environment. You can do this as a remote organization or a localized door-to-door sales company like a lot of our clients and execute the same numbers in process, but just contrary in an online or a face-to-face environment. And so what it looks like on a month typically to get these kind of results, which again, we're talking about 5 to 10 retained every 90 days, you need at least 400 applicants a month. So 400 applicants come in. Okay, I'm not going to talk about every little metric because I don't want to waste time with all the crazy details. I need you to understand the general structure so you can go, oh my gosh, this is what I need to do. Okay, and so 400 applicants a month. Typically, you're going to have a third of those or 50% of those look like they're worth speaking to from a background perspective. And every company is a little bit different. If I have a higher level sales role, I'm going to be pickier on the background. If I have more of an entry level sales role and I can take on volume, where I'm going to be not as strict on their background because I can train an entry level, 25-year-old guy or something into the role very easily. So there are a little bit differences there, but the averages are 400 applicants a month. A third to 50% of those look worth speaking to. We're pumping those bodies into a group interview. Typically, our clients are doing 1 to 2 group interviews a week, dependent on the time availability. You can get away with doing one larger group in a week, depending on how large your office is. If you're doing them via Zoom online, then you're not limited by size, so you can push as many people into one online group interview in a week that you possibly can. But the more options that the candidate has, obviously the better. Just like if you were to, have a consumer or a business owner, you're better off, option closing them into one of 2 options versus only giving them one. So same thing from the recruiting perspective. But anyways, they're doing 1 larger or 2 medium-sized group interviews weekly, just pumping bodies in, pitching the dream. We'll talk about more of that in a little bit. And then they're funneling people into finals. Okay, so what a typical week looks like is 1 to 2 group interviews for 20 to 30 minutes each, and then 5 to 10 final interviews for 30 minutes each. So roughly a 4 to 5 hour time investment, and within that time investment, you're recruiting 2 people, and you're doing that week after week, right? So every week, 1 to 2 group interviews, 5 to 10 final interviews, sign 2 reps. Next week, same thing. And you do 2 week, 2 week, 2 week, 8 a month, 8 a month, 8 a month. Over 90 days, you recruit 24 plus people, and through the volume, right, you find the 5 to 10 that stick, right? And again, the nature of the sales process, the nature of your comp plan, how good leadership, onboarding, and all that type of stuff is dependent on retention, but through the volume, you're gonna hit your recruiting numbers. Okay, and so that's in general what it looks like. And you don't necessarily have to do these exact numbers, right? For some people, 8 recruits a month sounds overwhelming, right? So if that's the case, you can apply the same process because the model is built around efficiency, eliminating the phone interview, pushing the best people into group interviews, and eliminating the no-shows into one-on-ones, which are both amazing things, especially if the end recruiting results are better than doing phone interviews and one-on-one final interviews and stretching out the process too much. But you don't have to do this much volume, right? If you want to recruit 2 to 4 people a month, that's cool. Or if you want to 5x these results because you have the geography or the multiple offices or your remote organization can take it on, then you can do that as well. But here's the average, and these are the numbers of what it looks like to get to 5 to 10 retained reps over a 90-day period. So that's the general process, right? Advertisements, streamlined screening and scheduling, pushing all the best candidates into group interviews, pitching the dream. 50 to 75% of them at a minimum are going to be interested in taking next steps. You funnel them into one-on-one interviews. You have 5 to 10 one-on-one interviews conservatively. You recruit 2 people weekly conservatively, 24 over 90 days, and you retain your 5 to 10. Now let's go to the next part of the training. Okay, part 2 of the training, it's candidate lead generation. Now that we understand this general high volume structure of candidate leads, streamlined screening and scheduling, group interviews and final interviews, eliminating the phone interviews, eliminating the no-shows on the one-on-one interviews. It's like, okay, now that I understand that general structure, how do I actually get the volume through the front end part of the recruiting process to hit that end result, which is in this case, onboarding my 8-ish a month, 24 over 90 days, and retaining my 5 to 10, okay? So candidate lead generation is so important, equally as important as every part of the process, but there's kind of a few core things that you know about candidate lead generation already. You know that you can do cold contacting, right? Like full cycle cold contacting recruiting. That takes a big time investment, and that takes having like a top level 5% type of opportunity typically to get people's attention if they're good producers to even have an opportunity to recruit them. And it's not very scalable, right? It's a big time investment. It's not predictable. And you can't recruit volume, that's for sure. The next thing is referrals. Referrals are amazing hires. We just had a referral, and she's doing amazing on our sales team. And so referrals are a great thing, but those are also not predictable, right? If I have 0 sales reps right now, maybe I have a network of people like on Facebook or something like that. But if I have 0 sales reps that are successful right now, hypothetically, I can't really pull referrals from them yet, right? I need to have an existing team with potentially relationships outside of the team to get referrals potentially to come work with us. And so a lot of you may have already built your organization on that already. Maybe you're a little bit smaller. Maybe you have 2 to 3, 4, 5 reps, and you've kind of capped out from a relationship perspective, but you know what the referral thing looks like. It's a blessing and it's an amazing thing, but it's not scalable and it's not predictable. You can't say, I'm gonna recruit 10 people a month over the next year, 120 people, and retain 35, right? You can't predictably say that. And so following that, what you've heard me talk about already is advertisements. So paid advertisements is something that is predictable and can get you in a place where, in this example, you're pumping the 400 plus applicants a month into the front end recruiting process to have the end result of your 8-ish recruits per month. So advertisements, what's amazing is that they're immediate, right? When we work with a company, within 1 to 2 weeks, they're immediately doing group interviews and right away hiring people. Next, they're predictable, right? I can predictably say that, hey, I can build a team of 5 to 10 commission-based sales reps in the 90 days, right? I can't do that with cold contact recruiting. I can't do that with potential referral recruiting, but I can do that with the right paid advertisements and enough volume coming through the recruiting process. Okay, so ads, right? You know now that, hey, referrals and cold contacting, not necessarily predictable and immediate and super scalable. So if I know I need to do advertisements now, what do I actually do with that? Okay, well, the question depends on the industry, the opportunity, the market that you're in, your budget. But in general, here are some really good practices and things at a high level to understand, right? You may have 1 to 2, 3 sales opportunities that exist within your organization, okay? And so with the ad platforms, depending on which one you're at, you're gonna wanna have like 3 to up to 6 different job titles, job descriptions, income ranges, with different budget allocations across all the markets that you serve, because candidates are looking for opportunities in a unique way, right? Maybe I'm a candidate looking for a solar sales job, or maybe a candidate in that same market is looking for outside sales representative roles. And so in general, depending on your opportunity, whether it's remote, it's inside sales, it's outside sales, it's closing on the phone, it's closing in the home, it's B2B closing, D2D, B2B sales, depending on what that looks like, you probably need at least 3 and up to 6 different job titles where people that are looking for your opportunity that most likely fit the role are actually finding you, so you can get the front end volume through the recruiting process. And through the volume, you're gonna find the recruits that you need. So again, depending on the industry, the opportunity, the geography, the budget, you're gonna have multiple different titles, income ranges, job descriptions to get attention from a wide marketplace so you can actually hit your recruiting goals. So that's candidate lead generation. Let's go to the next training. The next part of the training is about screening and interview scheduling, right? We have enough candidate leads pumping through the front end part of the recruiting model, but how do we now screen through them quickly enough if we have hundreds a month to deal with, or maybe even thousands depending on the scale of our recruiting efforts, and how do we quickly get through them and get the best ones into the group interview? Well, part of that is done through administrative work. And actually the majority of it is done through administrative work. And we're ultimately eliminating the phone interview, which is what I want you to understand today. Okay? The phone interview is just simply in the high volume sales recruiting process, a waste of time. If I could eliminate 75% of the time investment to get in front of the best candidates and ultimately get off the phone and transition my efforts to administrative work, wouldn't I want to do that? Wouldn't that be a process that's more scalable? And wouldn't it eliminate a lot of the things that I hate about recruiting, right? Like doing the phone interview and talking to people that are not fit for the role, and then also having people no-show to the interview, and then having people no-show to the final interview after they say that they want to come in, whether it's in an office or via Zoom for their one-on-one, right? Wouldn't that be an awesome thing, an improvement to my job, whether I'm an owner, whether I'm a recruiter, sales manager, or entry-level office manager? Wouldn't that be the case, right? So with the phone interview, it's a time waste. You can eliminate 75% of the upfront part of the recruiting efforts and just transition to administrative work that's actually easy, that you don't dislike. So that's awesome. Then you eliminate no-shows. You also, followed by that, have a scalable model. What I mean by that, let's hypothetically say I'm a small business owner and I'm handling the recruiting efforts by myself right now and I'm doing phone interviews, right? Well, if I'm going to delegate that task to maybe like an entry-level office manager, administrative assistant, don't you think they're going to be less better at getting those candidates excited about the commission-based sales opportunity and into the office or into the Zoom one-on-one interview with me? And so doesn't that follow that they're going to screw up opportunities for you to recruit people? So that's what I mean. If it's phone interview based and the person that it's delegated to is not a really high-level salesperson or that has experienced success in that specific position, then they're going to blow opportunities. It'd be like in a sales process if you had a crappy appointment setter that just continued to lose opportunities for the closer. So it's the same thing. So my point is when you eliminate the phone interviews and you transition to administrative work, and I'll talk about those details in a second, you create a process that is scalable. I can have anybody trained on that within just a couple days. I can have a recruiter do that, and they can free up their time. I can have an office manager do that. I can have an owner do that and spend 30 minutes a day accomplishing these 5 to 10 retained rep goals every 90 days. An owner can do that now and not do the time investment into recruiting that's necessary to build their team. Or I can just do this better at scale because there's no phone interviews involved. Regardless of what your situation is, you can get rid of the phone interview, eliminate 75% of the time investment into the recruiting process, eliminate no-shows, have a scalable process that can be duplicated by other sales teams or your office manager or recruiters or other partners later. And then lastly, it's just better results because I'm able to get more volume through the process, right? With the phone interview, if I have 3 to 4x the time investment in the upfront part of the recruiting process, then that means I can only contact based on my time availability 3 to 4 times less versus if I were doing administrative work. And because of those two transitions with the administrative side, I can screen and schedule 3 to 4 times as many people with the right process. And so because of the administrative stuff and eliminating the phone interviews, you free up time and actually get better results because you're pushing more volume through the process. So my point is the administrative work wins in the end. And we've eliminated the phones, which everybody hates in the recruiting process, or at least 99% of people do, right? And you have applicants come in, you have outbound emails and texts with group interview scheduling links, scheduling into group interviews, and it just makes it simple. Then the time investment goes into the group interview. Let's move on with the trading. And the next part of this high volume sales recruiting process is obviously the interview structure, right? We have leads coming through the process. We've streamlined the upfront part of the screening and scheduling process, and now we're pushing bodies into a group interview. And the group interview is all about pitching the dream and bringing clarity to the A to Z opportunities so the candidate knows that they want to move forward or they don't. And then the final is, like, from a sales perspective, the close. And you're looking to close the people that are ideally a fit for the position. Right? So the first thing is the group interview. First, you got to understand that they don't know much about the opportunity. So you got to bring clarity of what the process is going to look like. As an example, the introduction should be something like, hey, this is Ryan with Sales Recruiting University. I'm so excited that you're here today. First off, I know the whole group thing is not that personable of a process, but we're a quickly growing organization, and this is just simply the quickest way to connect with everybody that seems like a potential fit. So obviously you have initial interest, and that's why you applied and that's why you're here. But the goal in the next 20 minutes or so is to respect your time and just bring clarity to the full A to Z opportunity so you know if it makes sense to take next steps in our hiring process, which we will talk about at the end. But so excited to go through everything. You can hold your questions to the end because probably the majority of them are going to get answered, and then we can finish up with some Q&A if that's helpful at the end as well. Right? So you want to be clear at the beginning of what the process is going to look like. You want to recognize because they have the opinion as well that the whole group thing's not that personable, and then that solves that concern for any of you that are maybe weary of that. And then you got the A to Z presentation, right? Just like in a sale, right? I'm building value, and then I'm quote unquote dropping price. In high volume commission-based sales recruiting, maybe if I have an all commission, door-to-door type of sales opportunity where people are self-generating and closing their own deals as an example, right? Not everybody on planet Earth obviously wants to do that, but there are some people that are not thinking about that type of opportunity today that will do that work and ultimately be a fit for your organization and produce, which is an amazing thing. But you got to get good at recruiting. And so in the group interview, it's about building value in your industry, selling them on the industry, value in your company, the story, the culture, the sales model, the potential for income, the career advancement opportunity that exists within your organization. And then you get into the core details of the opportunity that sometimes people don't like. And so you're building value in those core things, helping the people in the group interview understand why you're freaking awesome and what's actually contrary to the marketplace and how you're different, so they can say, hey, I like this industry. Wow, I like the company story, the culture, and I like that they're so unique from other opportunities I've seen. Man, I'm interested. And then it's like the sales model is boom, 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 right? Commission-based door-to-door or whatever, right? You say it in a sexier way, but I'm trying to give you a shortened version of it so you can picture it in your mind. But you have a strong introduction. You lay out what the process is going to be like. You build up value in the opportunity, bring clarity to the industry, the company story, the culture, the general sales model, how you guys benefit customers, whether that's B2B or D2C. And then you transition into the compensation plan, the ramp up to get to a full-time income, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's a month, or maybe it's 90 days. And then at the end of that, people are either interested or not. And then you wrap up the presentation and let them know what next steps are going to be, right? And so it's like, you know, if I'm doing it on Zoom, right? Face-to-face and Zoom are a little bit different, but if I'm doing it on Zoom, hypothetically, it's like, okay, guys, so that's pretty much the basics of the opportunity. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit more to talk about in a one-on-one meeting. But again, I want to be mindful of your time. If you're like 10 out of 10 interested in, you know, everything that we talked about now, and you have A, B, and C, and you're really looking for X, Y, Z in your future, then that's awesome. We can't wait to meet you. Just hang tight for a couple minutes, and we'll tell you what next steps look like in our hiring process. If you feel like that's not you, blah, 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 you can jump off the call, right? Then, you know, 25 up to 50% max, jump off the call in a Zoom environment. Again, it's different in a face-to-face environment. They leave the room, and the outro is a little bit different. But then you have people jump off the call, and then you bring clarity to what the next part of the hiring process is. Technically in Zoom, there's a few different processes. You know, in a face-to-face model, you can funnel people into one-on-ones right after the group. You can do mini one-on-ones and schedule like a final the following day. If you have multiple leaders, maybe that looks different. But in general, you understand what I'm saying. You're pushing people into a group. You're pitching the dream. Clarity at the beginning of what the process is going to look like. Building value in your opportunity and why it's unique from the rest of the marketplace. You're bringing clarity to the opportunity so they either know they're interested or not. And then you're letting people jump out of the process in a face-to-face or in a Zoom environment, and then transitioning the rest into a one-on-one interview. And then the one-on-one interview, the final interview, is like the close, right? And I look at this kind of like a B2B sales process. Ultimately, you're figuring out what they liked about the presentation, what's been missing about past opportunities, what they're looking for in their future, and you're diving deep to understand the skill sets, then diving into their values, right? You want to understand that they have the basic skills or values necessary to succeed at the role. And for everybody, that's different, right? If I can take an entry-level guy and I can turn them into producers within 1 to 2 weeks because of the nature of my position, then my skill set requirement is going to be much different than if I have a longer sales cycle and I need a higher level sales guy that's selling something that's $50,000 as an example, where there's going to be a 30 to 60 day ramp up hypothetically, right? So there's different skill sets depending on the opportunity, and your value system is whatever your value system is within your company. Maybe that's not defined yet, but from a hiring perspective, you want to make sure somebody has the right skills and they align with the values or the culture of the organization. And so in the final interview, you're diving into what they liked about the presentation, what's been missing from past opportunities, what they want in future opportunities. Then you're diving in to make sure that they have the general skill sets and values, at least from what they're personally saying. Maybe there's a reference in there Most of our clients don't do that because it's based on high volume and they're just pushing bodies in week after week after week. But if you're hiring less and maybe you have training pay or salary or leads, you can be a little bit more pickier and do references. So that's a preference thing. But ultimately, the one-on-one, the final is the close part of the recruiting process, and then you're transitioning to signing them up and plugging them into whatever your onboarding process is. And so that's the group and the final. Let's transition to the next part of the training. Part 5 of the training is about the onboarding process, and this is so insanely important. Some companies just pass this over because they assume that because they sign quote unquote a salesperson, that salesperson should just get to work and get through the learning curve of the role and have success, and if they don't, it's totally on them. Well, that's really not the case. That's like hypothetically if I sold merchant services and I sold a client and then they signed the contract and I never really did anything from there and the product never got fulfilled. Or if I was a solar company and I sold solar in the home and I got the contract and maybe the initial check or whatever, and nothing happened from there. The site survey, the installation, nothing happened, and I'm wondering why there wasn't success in that process, right? Well, the same thing exists when you're building a sales organization, right? You don't just sign the rep, you provide an experience that results into success, assuming that they're doing the sales activities to see success and make an income in the role. And so my point is that onboarding, that initial training part, that experience that they get as they come onto your organization is so important because they're going to make quick assumptions about you. So the first part is the administrative stuff that happens post you signing them up, right? You get the rep to the final interview, you get them to close, they sign their agreement. Well, you want to structure out and figure out what it looks like administratively to make sure that they have a good experience. Maybe that's getting access to their company email, CRM, and call software, whatever. I don't know what it is for you, but whatever administrative tools are necessary to get them access to the role, maybe in your administrative process, you get them access to that with a welcome email, some training videos, and they're somewhat prepared before they start their new day on Monday or whatever it is, right? But anything administratively within the process, sending out their agreement, getting them access to the tools, welcome email, setting expectations, recapping on onboarding and what that day is going to be like and getting an email out, whatever happens administratively to make sure that they say, man, this company is organized and they got their stuff together and that's making me more excited. You want to get to that place because what you don't want is you don't want them to commit to whatever your commission-based sales position is and then they're not really clear of what's next. They're not getting the tools. They didn't have expectations of what onboarding is going to be. There's no welcome email. There's no clarity in the process. Right, and maybe you give access to reps to everything on the first day. But in general, whatever happens administratively within the role, whether that's before they actually start on their first day or in the first week, whatever it looks like, you need to provide that stuff with clarity, make it really organized so that they're actually impressed and not saying, man, this freaking company is so unorganized. I'm having doubt now that I've committed my future to them, and that's exactly what you don't want, especially in a commission-based sales environment. So administratively, things got to be super, super dialed. So the next thing in onboarding is the initial training, the experience that reps get as they get trained into the position, right? So you want that stuff to be structured and organized so they have a good experience and ultimately have the end result, assuming they're doing these sales activities to succeed, the end result of producing, making an income, and being happy that they joined the organization, right? So initial training, whether that's 1 week or 30 days or 2 months, whatever it may be, it depends on what it really looks like to ramp up in your role. So as an example, if I have like a entry-level appointment setter that's remote working from home or a door-to-door canvasser that's only setting appointments, those appointment setting type roles are more entry level. So maybe it takes less than a week to really get them going. Maybe I have a higher level position, that is selling home improvement projects or something like that. And it takes 45 days, 30 to 45 days to get ramped up. Whatever it looks like for you to take the average Joe, right? You don't want to think about the top 5% performer, but the average Joe that's showing up to the meetings, applying what you're teaching them, going through the sales activities necessary to succeed, whatever the average Joe probably needs. And you want to think about this conservatively to see success in the role. You want to think about that person, what it looks like for them to ramp up and fully and intellectually understand the role, at least up to like 85 to 90% of it. So you want to think through that timeline and then structure out the experience around initial training and coaching so that they can get success and get through their learning curve as fast as possible and produce and retain, right? You want them to retain. And so you got to get the administrative stuff really dialed so they understand that you're organized. You want to structure out the initial training, whether that's 1 week or 3 months or something in between or whatever it is, so that they get the right experience, assuming they plug into the organization and do the sales activities. You want to make sure that they get an experience that results into them going through the learning curve, producing, making an income, being happy with your organization, and sticking past that initial training part. And if you can get there, that's an amazing place to be. So let's get to the next part of the training, which is actually retaining them after initial onboarding training, and then we'll be on our way to building the team. Part 6 is about company culture. This is what's actually going to retain people long-term, right? We just don't want to understand how to recruit volume and potentially onboard volume with some success. We want to get the successful people that really align with our values and our culture to stay long-term. And that comes with company culture and having some of these foundational things I'm going to talk about today. Now, these are really foundational things in a full commission type of opportunity, and maybe 1 to 2 of them don't align perfectly with what you got going on, but it's still good for you to hear and understand and to think about. And so here's a core couple things or a few things that you need to be thinking about. The first thing is a really solid team structure that keeps everybody trained up and tight-knit. So I'll give you ours as an example. We help a lot of outside and remote sales organizations. We're actually a remote sales team, so we have reps all over the country. But our VP, in regards to a team structure, our VP, Brandon, he has a daily sales huddle that he does every single day, Monday through Friday at the same time, followed by what we call a power hour, which everybody transitions right from that Zoom meeting into doing 20 plus outbound calls to do follow-ups, to force follow-ups, and to create additional opportunities to fill up white space on the calendar. And then he also does one-on-one calls with each rep once a week and provides coaching around a call from the previous week. So he can say, here's what you did well on the call, here's what could have been better. And so they get that one-on-one coaching, they get the daily sales team meetings, they follow up in that into that power hour right after the daily sales meetings. We force the outbound, which forces wins within the organizations, and that is involving activities. So we force wins at the beginning of the day, and that gets people hyped up. And that general structure, those 3 things are really good for us. So for us, it's daily sales meetings followed by an outbound power hour where we're doing cold calls or follow-ups, and ultimately that one-on-one coaching from the VP. Now, that's not going to necessarily be perfect for you, but I wanted to give you an example of structure so you can think through whatever is going to be best for you. But the structure keeps everybody together often, keeps a tight-knit unit, which you want from a team perspective. It doesn't keep people too decentralized from the organization. It forces training, forces coaching. In that team structure, you want to have a culture of you show up, bottom line, you don't miss, and that is what it is. Even in an all-commission environment, you want to have a team that's excited about participating and being together, not some guy that's off doing his thing and not participating in our example in the power hour and missing a couple team meetings a week. You don't want that. That's going to be somebody that you want to cut off of your organization, at least in our example. But team structure is really important. Followed by that is celebrations or competitions, at least celebrations around sales activities, sales production or closings, and money that follows that, right? So sales activities, knocking doors or hitting the phones or a certain amount of pitches that day, right? Celebrating those things when reps are doing them, right? Because those are the things that transition into success in the sales role. Celebrating closes, right? When somebody gets a deal, you want to celebrate that. You want everybody to know about that. Celebrating income, right? Hey, John just hit his first 10K income month. Or, Sally just made 22K a month. Hey, Ryan just made 4K in his first month. The most he's ever made was 2,500 a month, right? Or whatever it is, but you want to celebrate those things and maybe even implement some competition from a monthly, quarterly, or annual perspective to get people excited about and incentivized to do those sales activities, to close deals, and to make a good income. So structure, and then celebrations, and even ideally competition around activities, closing, and income. Following that from like a medium to long-term perspective, you want to have an opportunity in an organization that allows people to continually grow and advance in their career, their professional life, their personal growth, and then obviously their income. If you don't provide that type of experience for people and continue to up the bar on what they can do within your business, they're going to get bored and leave, especially the top performers, because those guys know that they can create something outside of your business, either by themselves or with another company that maybe has more upside within the company from a position or income perspective. And so you want to have an opportunity that allows for them to continue to grow. And so as a business owner or a sales leader, you got to think about the future and what you really want to accomplish, right? If your goals are small, then you're only going to attract and keep people that are okay with the bare minimum. But if your goals are large and they're long-term and there's constant steps to that long-term growth, then you're going to retain a lot of people that align with your culture, and they will fill those gaps and allow you to hit those long-term goals. So having an opportunity to grow into financially and professionally is super important. And then specifically in like an all commission type of sales environment, and even more in like a 1099 environment, you want to have a culture of freedom, right? That's followed by a really big income and producing, resulting into you having a life that provides more freedom than the typical job. And so freedom's a really important one, especially in a commission-based sales environment. But these are some core things to be thinking about. Let's go into the next part of the training and wrap this thing up. Okay, part 7 finally is the sales manager topic, right? The training was how to recruit 5 to 10 commission-based sales reps in 90 days while finding a sales manager at the same time. And the answer is short and sweet. You're finding that person through the volume of hires, right? If I recruit 24 people over the next 90 days and I retain 5 to 10, let's say hypothetically that number's 8, well, it's very likely, 90% of the time, there's going to be somebody out of that group of 8 people that will arise as the leader, somebody that aligns with the values, the culture of the business, somebody that's probably one of the top 2 salespeople, but also somebody that invests into the relationships at the company, serves you as an owner or a leader within the company and serves other reps. That person is going to be your sales manager. And so ultimately, it's the safe way of finding a leader, right? When you find leadership outside of the business, it's really risky, especially in an all-commission type of environment, because people love the idea of managing people. But in a commission-based sales environment, if somebody is not humble enough, especially if they don't have a really specific background with a high income in that exact sales leadership role, if somebody's outside of that, which is going to be the case for 95% of organizations hiring and needing sales management, especially for medium to small businesses. If they are not humble enough to grow into the sales role first, then they're for sure just not a fit. If you hire a sales manager before you build your team and you haven't seen them produce and show up and align with your values and result in just to being a person that you like, well, 95% of the time you're going to waste your time. And you're going to start building your team up again. And so if you're an owner, if you're a VP of sales and you need a sales manager or whatever your title is, then you need to commit to being the leader, unless you get really lucky, which is probably not going to happen, and you find the perfect leader to come on board. So I would just honestly disregard that idea and plan on being the leader, being the sales manager for the time being, and pumping in those bodies to the organization so you can see over time your sales manager arise, and then you can advance them. And then from there, it's not a really hard pass off. And then, it's like, it's all on you. It's a 90-day transition, maybe 30, 60, 90 days at the most, while you're helping them really understand the business, making sure that they align with the way that you want to manage, or that there's some type of blend there, and just making sure that they get the support that they need from a management structure so the sales team is happy, and so you get the end result of them being successful in that new position they're transitioning into. And so anyways, my company again is Sales Recruiting University. We do a couple things. We help companies that maybe don't have foundational things like sales leadership or onboarding processes or whatever it may be, implement foundational things so they can recruit volume and retain 5 to 10 every 90 days. So we help companies implement foundational things and recruiting systems. But we also act as the sales recruiting department for currently about 100 companies all across the country at all sorts of different levels, from small B2B, remote organizations to large D2C 1099 door-to-door sales companies that have hundreds of reps and that are doing millions of dollars a year. And so we again specialize in high volume commission-based sales recruiting. If you're the type of business that needs a constant need for commission-based sales reps or primarily commission-based sales reps to be pumped into the company, then we could probably serve you in a way that nobody else on the freaking planet can. And so there's a link somewhere around here. You can connect with my sales team. We'll offer the couple things that we do, see if there's a potential fit to work together. Regardless if you schedule the call or don't, I hope you got massive value out of the training today. And we wish you the best of luck in your future. Thank you so much.